What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, November 21st edition of the NBA Lineup Generator. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. We have a 5-game NBA slate tonight, but it should be a pretty interesting one to take a look at. We're not waiting on a ton of injury news, so most of this stuff is likely to look pretty similar to how it will as we get closer to lock. That's not to say that you should be playing these lineups, but this video should have a little bit longer shelf life than normal just based on today's injury report and the way things are looking right now. We also just have a lot of good players on this slate. We have a game with a 252-point total, which I think is the highest I've ever seen, certainly the highest that we've seen this season. So that makes the slate interesting. There are a couple of other high-scoring games as well. So it should be pretty easy to pretty interesting rather to walk through. But first, make sure that you do give this video a like on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you get alerts when our show goes live. If you're watching on Twitter, give it a like there as well. Now, starting on DraftKings, we are going to, once again, choose contrarian lineups. That's typically what I go to in this video. It's going to just cut out the chalkiest lineups and give you lineups that are more contrarian, but still project to be profitable in the long run. I'm not going to lock any players in, but this is an option available to you if you're using it on your own, especially if you're playing maybe one lineup or three lineups, you want Trae Young in all of them. Just save yourself some time and click on him here. But for the purposes of this video, I'm not doing that. And now we can take a look at these lineups. And if you're not already familiar with this tool, I assume that most of you are. But if you're not, just to quickly let you know what you're looking at, this tool uses our player projections, our ownership projections, our simulation models on the back end. It runs a bunch of simulations with all of that data, and then it presents to you individual lineups that we project to be profitable in the long run. So you're getting the end result of what is a relatively complicated process. And at the end, you have your lineup. You can see how much salary it uses, the projected fantasy points, the projected ownership. We have sliding scales down here at the bottom, so you can see how it grades out in terms of projection compared to other lineups and in terms of ownership compared to other lineups. And then for each individual player, you have their salary, their projection, their ownership projection, and this option over here at the right with two arrows. If you click on that, say you just don't want Colin Sexton, but you really like the rest of this lineup, so you don't want to discard it, you can click on this, scroll down, and replace Colin Sexton with any $4,500 or less point guard and maintain the rest of your lineup. So that's an option. Then here at the bottom, you have the option to save it or discard it, just like a dating app. If you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you can get rid of it. And you can save up to 20 of these, and that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to look and see how our player exposures look across those 20 lineups. So here you can see over on the left-hand side, you have the 20 lineups that we saved. Here on the right-hand side, you have your individual player exposures. So we have Jalen Johnson in 50% of our lineups, Trae Young in 40%. Nothing wrong with either of those. Atlanta is in the game I was alluding to earlier with the 252.5-point total. They're taking on the Pacers. Both of those guys are going to be very popular. Trae Young is projected for 39% ownership, so we're about even on him. Jalen Johnson projected for 35, so we're a little bit high there. Rui and Anthony Davis coming in next. Rui and Davis both at 35%. Hachimura is one of the better value plays tonight at 4,500. He's pulling 20% ownership. Anthony Davis serves as a contrarian play, though. He's only pulling about 12% ownership. We're getting 35%. So that's a pretty interesting spot to get to. We don't have as much opportunity cost at the center position tonight as we do on a lot of slates. So that is one potential reason you're seeing Davis show up. Jalen Smith is center only as well, 4,200, getting 35% ownership. He's just a little bit cheap, even as Miles Turner's backup. We're getting to DeJounte Murray, Taurean Prince, Cam Reddish, all at 30%. Murray in that very appealing Atlanta-Indiana game. Prince and Reddish as value pieces in what's a pretty appealing Lakers and Utah game as well. That game has a very healthy 238 total that would be standing out on most slates, but isn't on this one because of the Atlanta game. Then we're back to Tyrese Halliburton, getting 25% of him. Again, another spot that we can pay up to be contrarian in a good spot. He's only pulling 9% ownership right now because Trae Young's getting so much more because DeJounte Murray's popular, but we were able to get to Halliburton as well. And then we're rounding it out with some low-owned dart play value, dart throws, Agbaji and Obi Toppin. Now, one way you can also customize your exposures. I just clicked the first 20 lineups I saw. I didn't go through and look to see who was in them. So let's say, you do something like that. You're not paying attention to every single player in every single lineup that you're selecting. And then you get here and you're like, all right, I don't want 25% Agbaji. You can click on him. It's going to highlight your Agbaji lineups. You can go in and either manually remove him and replace him with somebody else like I already showed you, or just discard the lineup, go back to get more lineups, and then grab a lineup that doesn't have Agbaji to replace the one that you discarded. So I'll take this lineup. And now we're down to 20% Agbaji instead of 25. So you can handle it that way as well. Now looking at one of these lineups individually just to kind of see how it looks. Scrolling through, most of them have aggregate ownership in the same range. We do have one here, only 89.5% aggregate ownership, 248 fantasy point total. So a pretty interesting lineup. We have DeJounte Murray at 8K. He's pulling 11% ownership, projects for 40 fantasy points. Max Strus at 6,200, only 8% owned, projected for 30 fantasy points. Karis LeVert is questionable for the Cavs. That's one of the few pieces of big injury news we are waiting on. He's projected in for us right now, but if he were to be ruled out, Max Strus is going to look better. LeBron pulling 23% ownership, looks very good at small forward. Obi Toppin as a contrarian play, 4% owned. No real confidence in him, but he is cheap, and it is a very useful price point. You're going to see the field going to guys like Sadiq Bey, Rui Hachimura, a lot of guys in this price range. Obi Toppin is a bit lower owned. Anthony Davis at 12% owned, alongside LeBron. Interesting, but on a 5-game slate, not that big of a deal. There are ways that they positively correlate. The game ends up being higher scoring than projected. The game goes to overtime. So I think there's a tendency to look at these two and say, oh, well, you can't have them both. But neither of them are that expensive, and it is only a 5-game slate. And there are ways where the game environment can benefit both of them as well. Jaden Springer as a 6% owned punt play, only projects for 13 fantasy points. Certainly would not be upset about losing him. Same goes for Jabari Walker here, but that's how we're getting to Anthony Davis and LeBron, along with DeJounte Murray in this lineup. And then rounding out with Rui, who's projected for 20% ownership. Now we can go and look at the same thing on FanDuel. But first, if you are looking to use this tool for yourself, which I highly recommend, it is $14.95 per week. It is the most cost-effective way to get access to our data, our player projections, and our models. And you can sign up using the link below in the description on YouTube. I'll also tweet the link out below if you are watching this on Twitter. Again, this is perfect for your single entry, 3 max, 20 max. If you're a lower volume player, it doesn't make sense to outlay the type of money that the full Sims package, for example, may cost you. It's going to make it really difficult for you to profit over the course of a month if you're putting out a ton of money and you're not playing high stakes. But we created this tool for you. $14.95 per week. It should be a lot easier for you to profit, and it's going to present you with quality lineups that should make you better at DFS. Now, looking on the FanDuel side, again, we're going to skip locking any players, and we're going to just save the first 20 lineups that we get, and then we can make adjustments from there. And at the top here, things are going to look a little bit different than DraftKings. We have Bruce Brown, small forward, only 5,300. He's projected to be the second highest owned player, actually tied with Trae Young for the highest owned player on FanDuel. Just a very, very useful price point in a great game environment. We're getting to a lot of Jordan Clarkson. He's 26% owned. We have 40. We're getting to a lot of Halliburton here. He's a bit easier to get to on FanDuel than DraftKings. He's pulling 23% ownership compared to the 9% that he's getting on DraftKings, but a good play on either site. Clint Capella, 26% owned. We're getting 40. Banchero at a very favorable price tag in 35% of our lineups, along with Jalen Johnson and Max Strus. DeJounte Murray, the Anthony Melton, Keontae George, Benedict Mathurin, and the questionable Karis LeVert rounding things out here in 30% of our lineups. Now we can go and look at some of these other lineups. Now keep in mind, the aggregate ownership on FanDuel is generally going to be higher than DraftKings because you have 9 players instead of 8, and you're just adding the ownerships together. So looking at these lineups, most of them are in a pretty similar range. We have this one down here that looks pretty interesting. Only 140% projected ownership, but still 286 projected fantasy points, which is in line with everything else we have. And in this lineup, we have Halliburton at 23%, the Anthony Melton at 20%. They are our point guards. Nothing wrong with either of them. Karis LeVert, Benedict Mathurin both look pretty good. LeVert, 6,700, no Donovan Mitchell, so a bigger role for him. Benedict Mathurin, 5,400. Playing time is hit or miss, but in a very, very favorable game environment. We have a very popular Jalen Johnson as a $6,500 small forward at 32.5% owned. But here on FanDuel, we can use Rui as a contrarian play. He's only getting 7% ownership at 5,100 compared to the about 20% ownership he's getting on DraftKings at 45 or 4,600. So still a solid play on FanDuel, just for a different reason. We have Obi Toppin, again, as a contrarian option here, 4,400, 9% owned. Scotty Barnes, my favorite type of contrarian play. It's one reason I really like this slate. We talked about it with Tyrese Halliburton on DraftKings being 9% owned. Here you have Scotty Barnes, who's averaging about 1.3 fantasy points per minute this year. He's been one of the best players in the NBA, and he's just not getting any love today because he's relatively expensive and he's not playing in one of the games with a massive total. So you get to just take one of the better players in the NBA and play him at 4% owned. And if he has a good game, you benefit. And then we're rounding this lineup out with Yusuf Nurkic at 6,600. So again, that's all I have for you on today's walkthrough using the lineup generator. Highly recommend you utilize this tool for yourself. It will make you better, especially if you're somebody playing single entry, 3 max, 20 max type contests. And you can do so by using the link in the description below or the link that I tweet out below this if you're watching on Twitter. But other than that, that's all I have for you in this video. Thank you for checking it out, and good luck on your lineups tonight.